confess I don't understand the rules of baseball, but its charms are not lost on me. I have enjoyed a long-side game of wiffle ball, and I was quite good at it actually. I've also watched the Cardinals perched up high in the Busch Stadium beneath an endless St. Louis sunset. You know, those gorgeous skies that you only get out here in the Midwest. So I can appreciate the way the game appeals not only to my friends here, but to a populace more broadly. The idea that baseball, or sport more broadly, can be a unitive force is nothing new to us. On the small or domestic scale, it can bring families together. Sulky teenagers come out of the woodwork to sit on the couch and to watch the game together, to watch history be made. We often think of sports events as creating a sense of national togetherness, transcending partisan lines or politics. But the key word is national here, and here is where our departs. Our brilliant guest speaker is going to make an argument for sports' power both in a global and in a geopolitical context. We're going to hear about baseball's relationship to two countries which share a very long and entangled history, the United States and Japan. But thankfully, I'm not going to be the one explaining to you the subtleties of this argument. That task falls to today's wonderful guest speaker, Dr. Sayuri Guthrie Shimizu of Rice University. Dr. Shimizu has published prolifically on a range of subjects, each tangentially linked, but indicative of an incredibly inquiring mind, which makes sense. Before training as a historian, Dr. Shimizu went to law school and worked as a human rights lawyer. And as if law school weren't demanding enough, she also trained as a chef at the same time. As an academic, Dr. Shimizu has published on the formidable field of diplomatic relations, I'd rather you than me, contributing novel and useful perspectives, especially between the US and Japan, but also on the Cold War and on the Olympics, which, as we all know, is just as memorable for its politics as for its sporting achievements. Also, as you might expect, she has written extensively on the cultural mysteries of soft power, the way a nation asserts itself not through its military or technological prowess, but through its pop culture or its entertainment output. This is really where we alight tonight. What does baseball say about being American? What does it communicate to those overseas? The optics of it, the camaraderie, the leading names. If you were not American, what would you imagine it might be like to spend an evening fieldside? Dr. Shimizu's unwaveringly fresh historical perspective on this is a way of reminding us, among many things, that we are all participants in history. Those terribly mundane little jigsaw pieces of our lives, such as what we see on television or the games and the pastimes we grew up with, they deserve to have histories written about them, especially when the geopolitical undercurrents are very real and buzzing with life. Following Sayuri's presentation, Scott Lacombe, Assistant Professor of Missouri Politics, will join her on stage to continue the conversation. On those leaflets that you received as you came in, there's a little QR code. Scan this, and it will enable you to ask any question you'd like to a real prestigious historian of possibly America's greatest export. Go on, do it. We're incredibly lucky to have Dr. Shimizu with us tonight in our sort of wanderlust global tour of geographical perspectives on America's semi-quincentennial. So far, we have been to Australia, Italy, and France, with an exotic stay in Gary, Indiana, for those of you who are paying attention. Then there was a hop to more clement sunshine across the border to Mexico, before immediately scampering off to the snowy hinterlands of Iceland and to Canada. Today's visit, of course, is to Japan, and our next destination will be much less arduous for any weary travelers, a short trip by sea to Korea. We do hope you join us then.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, well, thank you very much for your generous introduction. And thank you to all for being here Friday night. I really appreciate you spending your precious Friday evening with me, because I'm sure there are million things that you could be doing in town, but I really appreciate you being here. And also, I would like to thank Kinder Institute for, and also the State Historical Society of Missouri for their support to this series. And also, close to home, Amber Spalding for the behind-the-scenes logistical support, which made my visit to this wonderful university city possible. And also thank you to Billy Coleman, Lily Saraton, and Jay Sexton for organizing this series and also inviting me to be part of this very, very exciting enterprise. So thank you to all. And I have a confession to make. I could not really sleep last night because Jay told me that it's been a really good turnout for the speakers in this series, and he said it was only a standing room only crowd. So I freaked out. Like, what if there are empty chairs here today? And it's so humiliating, and I started worrying about it, and then I could not really sleep. So, and then, you know, because I'm not a former judge of South Africa, I'm not a first lady of anything. So, so anyway, so thank you for spending your Friday evening with me. I'll do my best. So my charge today is to talk about what the United States at 250 looks like, and using Japan as a viewing lens. So I want to give you a quick run-through of Japanese views of the U.S. and what America represented. And baseball is going to be a very important part of it, but not all of it. So I'm sort of baiting and switching, sorry. But in do that, to give you a quick run-through of Japanese views of America and what America represented, I want to highlight three things. Okay. Oops, sorry. So the first thing is that I'm trained as a historian, and that means that history is about change over time. So how Japan viewed the United States and its constitutional democracy evolved over time, over the 172 years during which the United States and Japan have had formal diplomatic relations. So I tried to capture that change over time, and in order to do that, I would like to frame my story in three temporal units. So where is the, I have all these things. Okay, this is my secret weapon. So okay, can you see it? It's cool, isn't it? Right? So the first one is the beginnings, starting with the birth of the United States, 1776 to 1876, the first 100 years. And the second unit is the centennial, up to 1876 to sesquicentennial, 1926. It's just the 50 years, but a lot of things happened in those 50 years, so I just wanted to give a separate compartment to that time period. And the third part is the sesquicentennial, 1926 to bicentennial, 1976. And I hate to admit that I was already born by then. I do remember America's celebrating 200 birthday. So that's the third part of it. And then by way of conclusion, I would like to make a few observations on the United States as seen from Japan at the current moment, which is the semi-quincentennial. This is a tongue twister for me, so bear with me. So that's the first agenda, change over time. And the second, my agenda item is to really talk about complexities. So what I'm going to tell you, the story of Japanese views of the United States is by no means comprehensive. And in this short lecture, I can only focus on a select group of historical actors and their views of America. So, and even with those people who show up in my story, they have a very complex mixture of adulation and disappointment and yearning and repulsion even, and closeness and alienation. So this is a very, very layered and complex reactions that Japanese have. And then also the Japanese perspective is very, very diverse and multi-central as well. So I just want to highlight that complexity. That's the second agenda items. And then how U.S. history, the third one is, in fact, the most important, how the U.S. history and the history of modern Japan are intertwined. The U.S. was a very essential part of East Asia's and Japan's modernization and Westernizations. So this intertwined nature of U.S. history and Japanese history is something I really want to highlight in my talk today. So these are and you might think that it's kind of funny, that agenda, but this is something that American occupation forces used to do when they, after World War II, they taught Japanese how to live like a democratic citizen. And one way they try to do is at the elementary school. And all the elementary school kids have to learn how to run like a assembly or, deliberative assembly. And then they elect the head of the classroom, and the class has to do this agenda, and these are the things that we're going to talk about, and then we're going to have a vote on. These are the kinds of things, top-down citizenry making, but the Japanese kids in elementary school used to take very seriously. And look how serious I'm still taking America's cultural footprint. So let's go to the first one. Beginnings, the 1776 to 1875-ish. So let's start where it all began, 1776. And the United States declared independence. Last I checked, that's true. And then, where was Japan then in 1776? And since the actually, just to give you, those of you who are not very familiar with Asia's geography, I just wanted to see you this. That's this Japan and then Korea and then China is here, and this is Taiwan. Anyway, since the early 17th century, Japan was actually in diplomatic isolation, and mostly to keep Christianity out of the country. So the overseas trade and travel were fundamentally banned, and defining that ban was actually punishable by death. It was a criminal offense to go overseas. But as some of you know, I'm sure you know, that in 1853, Matthew Perry famously broke that diplomatic isolation, forcing Japan to open up to the outside world. But then what I'm going to say is that Perry's visit to Japan in 1853 should also be seen as a part of the United States trans-Pacific expansion into the empire in the mid-19th century. And the U.S. in this time period, the United States signed a treaty and established diplomatic relations with China in 1844 and Japan in 1854, and also with Korea in 1882. So these are should be really looked at as the clusters of United States sort of basically seeping into East Asia's international relations. And in that capacity, East Asia's modernization and Westernization really happened. United States was a very, very important component of that historical story, and that's what I said at the beginning as the intertwined nature of a story. And one evidence of that intertwined, braided nature of U.S. East Asian relations, I have a very good evidence. Shohei Ohtani, right? And I have a quiz for you. Who was the 2025 World Series MVP? Well, my daughter lives in LA, so I was hoping that he would marry my daughter. And becoming Shohei's mother-in-law, that was my early retirement plan, but then he had other plans. Shucks, I have to keep teaching yet longer. Anyway, so baseball is actually the evidence of the intertwined history of U.S.-Asian relations. So baseball, a lot of people just assume that baseball came to Japan during the U.S. occupation period after World War II, but actually came much, much earlier. Baseball came to the United States, to Japan in 1870s. It's just right after the Civil War. And how did that come? Well, what happened was that many young Americans, a lot of them were recently demobilized by the Union Army or Confederate Army, or they were looking for a job, and they were recruited by the Japanese government to help them modernize and adopt Western institutions as well. Many Americans went to Japan to contribute to Japan's government-driven Westernization and modernization program in the 1870s and early 1880s. And the Japanese hired the specialists from abroad, mostly West Europe and the United States. And interestingly, there was a rough division of labor between those Western imperialists. For example, the Great Britain sent a lot of engineers, railroad engineers, and also manufacturing industry in general, and also the Navy. That was the Great Britain, so the bailiwick. And the France sent legal experts, particularly civil law, and also arts. No surprise there, right? And then the Prussia was medicine, and then law, and also military technology, particularly army fighting technology. So that was a Prussia, Germany. So what do you think the United States sort of specialty was in those days? Well, the United States sent school teachers and dairy farmers and agricultural experts and civil engineers. These are the kind of special expertise that was being created in the land-grant universities in the United States too. And some of these people went over to Japan and basically made that expertise and knowledge available to this newly industrializing Asian nation as well. So one of that wave of Americans who migrated to Japan in the 1870s and 1880s and contributed to Japan's modernization was this guy called Horace Wilson. He was a young Civil War Union Army veteran from Gorham, Maine. He came from Maine to Japan, and he's now inducted into the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame as well as the person who brought baseball to Japan. And he basically came to Japan, and somehow that he brought the bat with him when he came to this job overseas, right? And then he taught his school to teach the boys how to play baseball. And then it spread like a wildfire within Japan too, mostly as a school sport, part of the physical education. And I think the fact that America sent a lot of school teachers probably has something to do with it, right? Why that the baseball spread so extensively and so quickly. And by the 1880s, it spread so quickly that there was even a Japanese indigenous word for the baseball. It's, not this. Okay. Sorry. Oh, no. Sorry. No. Yeah. You didn't see that, right? Okay. Well, this is okay. Yeah. Okay, here you go. So the Japanese already had translated their own word for baseball. It's called yakyu, and this is the first Japanese baseball technique textbook written by this guy, Kanoe Chuma. He was a journalist, university-trained journalist. He was also baseball player, and he's the one who came up with this word yakyu, meaning ball in the field. So what more evidence do you need to argue that some sport was indigenized as their own local sport than to have their own word for it? So the yakyu and baseball are now part of Japan's modernization as well. And it spread really, Japan did not have any professional baseball for a long time. It was basically a school sport. But in the 1930s, Japan finally had a professional baseball teams. And the reason why it happened was this. Babe Ruth, Major League Baseball's tour to Japan in 1934. And look how he was really received by so rapturous welcome to Babe Ruth. And it's really amazing. This is the 1934 when, at the diplomatic level, U.S.-Japanese relation was going into tailspin. This is a kind of bilateral tension that culminated in the Pearl Harbor, right? So it's on 1934, but the people were just loving Babe Ruth. And at the time, the Japanese government had this the rule that the school sport has to remain amateur, so they cannot pay against the professionals. So that's why their solution was, and then let's make professional baseball, so they could play against Babe Ruth in the Major League postseason tour team. So that's how the professional baseball in Japan came about. So that's another interesting intertwining. I'm going to start sounding like a broken record, intertwining. So this is now I hope you are persuaded that baseball is the very good evidence for the intertwining nature of U.S., Japanese, and East Asian relations. And why do you think there are so many South Korean and Taiwanese major league players now? Because that sport was really a big part of their sportscape. And do you know that Americans also had some to do with it, but it was mostly Japanese colonial influence. Yeah, so another interesting ways that in history sort of comes alive in something as mundane as baseball as well. So now I got the intertwining task underway, so let's go back to 1776. So in 1776, what was Japan's knowledge of United States independence and the United States constitutional government? Well, Japan was, remember, still in diplomatic isolation. And given the state of communication at the time, no internet, not even telegraph, right? So you might think that the Japanese didn't know or hear about the American Revolution, but surprisingly, they did. And how did they find out about it? Through Dutch. The Dutch basically told them, basically. But that story is also very interesting. So during the period of diplomatic isolation, Japan actually had these four gates, through which they had a limited and very regulated trade with the outside world. Oh, no, sorry. Oh, okay. What am I doing? Oh yeah, this one, sorry. This is Tsushima. This is the gateway to trade with Korea. And this is the Nagasaki. That's the only the real port, trading port through which Japan traded with China and also the Dutch Republic. Dutch was the only Western country that was allowed to have limited trade with Japan during this time period. And also Satsuma was to trade with the Ryukyu, which was the old way of saying Okinawa. Kingdom of Ryukyu. And the Satsuma is the gateway to the north, which is the northern island was inhabited mostly, it was not developed, and then inhabited by the indigenous population, the Ainu, like Native American kind of thing. And then Japan basically conquered that Ainu land and displaced. It's the same kind of story. But anyway, so these are the four gateways, and then Nagasaki was the most important one. And oh man, oh God, sorry. What am I doing? Oh, Nagasaki is the most important, and the area trading post is called the Dejima. You can still visit there and see that it's a colonial Williamsburg kind of place. And they will speak to you in the old medieval Japanese and stuff. So this is the Dejima, and this is the entreport, trading post, where the Dutch had a trading house and had a very limited trade. So Dutch was the only one, and they were given that privilege on the condition that they would not proselytize Christianity. And they said, okay. So this is what was going on. So in 1809, the very first reference to the U.S. independence appears in Japanese historical records. And it appeared in out of all things, interrogation records of coming out of this Dejima. And what happened was really interesting. This guy, the Hendrik Doof, he is the head of the Dutch commercial house in Nagasaki, and he was interrogated by the Japanese government. What happened was in 1808, there was a United States, remember the United States used to make money on neutral trade. When the Europe was engulfed in the Napoleonic the wars, they wanted to remain neutral, and as a neutral, they wanted to trade with both sides, right? And that was there. And then the British did not want it, tried to crack down on it, and that was one of the reasons for the War of 1812, right? And anyway, so this is what the United States was also doing in the Pacific. Did you know that? I certainly did not know that. So at the time, the Dutch Republic, in Europe, they came under Napoleon's military occupation. So it became sort of a French colony or the French territory. So this area, Dutch East Indies, the Indonesia, present-day India, so the trade between this Dutch East India and Nagasaki, Japan, could have been actually blocked by the British Navy and also British privateers. It's even worse, right? How did the Dutch try to elude that? The British Navy and a privateer. Well, hire someone else. Hire Uber, basically. Maritime Uber. And that maritime Uber was the United States ships. And their theory was that since the United States is now independent, and the U.S. and Great Britain signed a peace treaty in 1873, the Brits would not attack American ships. Okay, even though it was like all the cargo was Dutch, then American ship was only hired. Look, that's an Uber, okay? So, but in 1890, one really big thing, hubbub occurs. British Navy frigate chased an American ship carrying Dutch goods into the port of Nagasaki and seized the Dutch trading house in Nagasaki and caused quite a hubbub. And Adolf was basically called into the government in Tokyo and basically interrogated. What's going on? Why did this happen? We are supposed to be in diplomatic isolation. Why is the British ship chasing American ship into the port of Nagasaki? And in this interrogation record emerged the very first reference to the American independence. And he said that the head of this merchant house in Nagasaki, Adolf, said this is that a British colony revolt around 1775 or 1776, and it became, because they did not want to pay taxes, which is not untrue, right? But anyway, and also now this country is a separate country, and the British king no longer can control it. And this new nation's capital's name is Washington, named after the country's first president and war general. And the head of that country now is a guy by the name of Thomas Jefferson. So that was the extent of that, the reference to the United States. At this point, in 1809, no details about American democracy or American political system or constitution, anything. It's just this independent country that did not want to pay taxes and working as a maritime Uber, basically. So this is the American, Japanese view of the United States and constitution democracy as 1809. And then Perry comes, as you know. He first came in 1853, and the Japanese government was not really ready for it, so please come back a year later, then we'll talk. And he came back, even more ships. And his black ship, you can tell from this historical paintings that how intimidated they were. Black ships, and then and Perry was a very good diplomat. He masterfully used a combination of coercion and what we call soft power. Perry fired blank shots from their 73 cannons in his fleet, which he claimed was a celebration of American independence, which was a lie. It was July the 8th, so anyway. So it was basically intended as a display of force, and Japanese got the message, you know, right? But Perry also used soft power. He showcased American industrial and the technological power to Japan. And so this is the kind of things he did. He showed a working miniature steam locomotive and telegraph system and daguerreotype camera, firearms, And not to forget whiskey and champagne and all sorts of wines. Don't forget the booze, right? That's very, very important. So, but actually, so he said that this is the kind of Western technological marvel that you could adopt if you deal with it. That was a subtle, not so subtle hint. And also, the Paris visit to Japan became a very interesting occasion for cultural exchange, too. Both sides showed what they thought was the best of their, like a performance. And in Japan, Japanese side did a sumo matches. And do you know what the Americans did here? Blackface minstrel show. Oh. And then all that, all these sort of the racial dimension, anything, all these details or complexity of it, totally lost to the audience, the Japanese side, because they just did not know enough about it. But because all these this minstrel show performers were white sailors painting their face black, and just they saw that the Japanese saw that face paint, and they thought that was American kabuki. So something was clearly lost in translation, right? So anyway, so this is the pairing, and then now Japan is open to the outside world. And what happened was that really destabilized the internal politics, and then that led to the Meiji Restoration. Here. In this sort of restoration revolution, the government of samurai was replaced by the new government headed by this new emperor, Emperor Meiji. He was only 16 years old at the time. So that basically destabilizing things that were triggered by Paris visit basically created an internal turmoil and crisis, and the result was the Meiji Restoration. Now Japan has a government headed by the emperor and highly centralized government. So Jay, you thought that America was a nation forged in crisis? Japan was too. So anyways, so then this is a major restoration. And they start interact with the United States. But you may wonder, since they have been isolated, did they have anybody who spoke English? Because when Perry came, the Japanese officers could speak Dutch. And then so the Dutch, there's a Dutch interpreters and then English. It was just really not the direct communications. So you may wonder, they had anybody who could speak English? And they did. And the answer is these are stowaways and castaways. One of them is guy on the left, Manjiro Nakahama. He was called John Manjiro. And then he was actually Japanese the fisherman. And in 1841, at the age of 14, Manjiro and 4 fellow fishermen were caught in a storm off the coast of Japan, and they were shipwrecked on the deserted island, and they were eventually rescued by an American whaling ship. And this American whaling ship took Manjiro and his fellow crew members to first in Hawaii, and this whaling ship was going to leave them in Hawaii. But then Manjiro, the only boy, tender age of 14, he wanted to go to America. So he begged this ship captain, whaling ship captain, and take me to America. And he ended up in Bedford, Massachusetts. And he was raised actually by this ship captain and his wife. And he grew up in his home in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. And he was given, he was named John Mann, and also he studied English, mathematics, and navigation. And also he was given a full high school education under the tutelage and protection of this family, whaling captain's family. And so when he finished school, he did the whaling with his sort of adopted father for a while. And then come 1849, do you know what happened? Gold rush, right? So Manjiro, so basically went to California gold rush in 1849 and successfully amassed enough gold in 4 months to buy a ship for the journey back to Japan. Yeah. So Manjiro returned to Japan in 1851 via Hawaii, and remember at the time, 1851, still, it was leaving the country was a criminal offense punishable by death. So first thing, when he landed, he was captured and he was interrogated by the Japanese government. And in this interrogation record, second reference to the US constitutional government appeared. So the US only appears in interrogation records. So that says something about the country itself, don't you think? Okay. Anyway, so what the Manjuro, he was well educated in the American public school, and what he told is the United States has a constitutional government. And the words he said was not the president. The Japanese word can be translated as a head honcho. Head honcho is elected by people every 4 years. And if he did a good job and his conduct was ethical and praiseworthy, he could serve another 4 years. That's kind of ironic, isn't it? Sorry. And another thing he said in this interrogation record is that in America, government officials don't write roughshod over people like in Japan, because government officials serve people. Is it true, or is it just a dream? Or anyway, that's what the Manjuro told the Japanese government, and then they bought it. So anyway, so at least they now know that they have this constitutional government thanks to this interrogation. So that's one. It's one in the second, in the left, right is Hamada Hikozo. His American adopted name was Joseph Heko, Hikozo Heko. And Joseph is his Christian name. He was baptized in the Catholic Church. But so this guy, Heko, was a son of a farmer, but in 1850, he also shipwrecked. He was traveling in a coastal freighter, and that got disabled by a storm. And after 5 days adrift, he was rescued by the American clipper ship and taken to San Francisco. And basically, he was adopted by really wealthy merchants in San Francisco, and they did the same kind of thing that the Manjuro did. And here's the interesting thing. In 1858, Heko became the first Japanese person to be naturalized as a U.S. citizen. Yeah, I mean, it was before the Chinese exclusion law of 1882, but then the American naturalization law at the time says that the naturalization is available only for free white persons, right? So, but then he became, was the first Japanese person to become naturalized, and then that's why 1858. And do you know what happened in the U.S.-Japanese relations, 1858? United States established the first consul's office in Japan in 1853. And so as an American citizen, American government official, he went to the consul's office and basically served the American government. It's really neat, isn't it? I think it's and then later on in 1864, Heko founded the first Japanese language newspaper, which introduced Western ideas and news to the Japanese reading public. The literacy rate was pretty high in Japan at the time, and there was a mass circulating magazines and newspapers appearing then. He really published one of them. And through this print media venue, he basically popularized the notion of democracy, individual liberty, and the separation of powers. So this is how that happened. So the castaways were some of the agents of disseminating the information, good news about American democracy. So now in Japan, so Japan now has a formal diplomatic relations, and not the 1960s, it's the 1860s. I'm sorry, that was an error. No, 1860s. Japan sent the first official diplomatic mission to the United States. This fish is called the Kairima, and that was the first wooden ship that Japan did for trans-Pacific the navigation as well. The fish withstood that long-distance navigations, and the youngest member of that the delegation, official delegation, was Yukichi Fukuzawa. He later became an educator and founded Japan's one of the two most prestigious private university, Keio University. And this is a young Fukuzawa. And he's really, really voraciously collected information about American democracy, American Constitution, that sort of thing. By the way, he also, when he went back to Japan, he took home with him a Webster dictionary as well. And he is credited with as the person who officially translated this phrase, all men are created equal, to Japanese. 天は人の上に人を作らず. So he translated it, and he founded Keio University. And I think one of our previous speakers talked about higher education in the United States, and the same kind of theme is running through here as well. So he founded Keio University. Oh, a little bit things about this other picture here. So in those days, the gender relations there, like men and women, was really strictly separated in Japan. And when he went to San Francisco, he was just amazed that men and women relatively freely interact with each other. And he was like, wow, what is it? Is this like democracy or freedom or whatever? So that was, and then he wanted to have his picture taken in a photo studio. And the photo studio's owner's daughter, 15-year-old daughter, she said, can I also get in the picture? And then he was like, okay, okay. And he took it. And 37, and, you know, he was a very stern-looking Japanese former samurai too. But until even 37 years later, he will be showing this picture to his buddies. So, yeah, men are the same, U.S. and Japan, right? Oh, no. Okay, so this is Fukuzawa. Okay, so talk about the Japanese higher education. So two other Japanese who went to the United States and studied in Victorian era America had a lot to do with higher education in Japan in the 1870s. And one is this guy. The one on the left is Joe Nijima. He was actually a stowaway. He defined, in 1864, he defined the overseas travel ban and stowed away on a ship and went to the United States. And he was just driven by a desire to learn about Christianity and Western science and also democracy, the Constitution, these kinds of things. And he ended up in Boston. And he, again, was sponsored by a kindly American merchant family, wealthy merchant family couple. And he attended the Phillips Academy and Amherst College. And in 1870, he became the first Japanese person to receive a bachelor's degree from a Western university. And he came back to Japan, and he founded Doshisha University in Kyoto, one of the premier private university, Christian university in Japan too. And this woman on the right, her name is Umeko Tsuda. She was a trailblazing Japanese educator and a pioneer in women's and girls' higher education. And in 1871, the Japanese government also sent another diplomatic mission, and this mission included 5 girls selected by the Japanese government to go to the United States and learn about America or other stuff. And Umeko, Tsuda Umeko was only 7 years old when she was picked. But then she ended up in Washington, D.C., and she was sort of adopted by very, very kindly American family. And she lived with them for 11 years and becoming fully acculturated and mastering the English language before returning to Japan in 1882. And Umeko returned to the U.S. in 1889 and studied biology at Bryn Mawr College, because there wasn't any place that a woman could really learn science in Japan, so she had to go back to America. And this made her actually the first Japanese woman to have a scientific paper published in a foreign scientific journal. And she came back to Japan and also founded Japan's first all-women's college, Tsuda College. So you can tell, like, all these people who went to Japan and learned about certain aspects of American modernity, really came back, and then really basically their expertise and their dedication and their vision bore fruit in the form of Japanese higher education as well. And what to me, to really blows me away is that, I always thought of Victorian America as this really rigid, structured society, but then the Victorian Americans, Christians' homes, surprising embrace of these castaways and stowaways and all this, right? The people, like, they don't know what an atom, right? Young kids, and basically embrace them, adopt them, and give them education. And that kind of openness, and I don't know, some fairness, or I don't know how to describe it. But this kind of what America was during the Victorian America was very important, and it's a very important component of Japan's development of Japanese education. Okay, I'm just running out of time, sorry. But then, can I go a little longer? Okay, is it okay? The boss is okay, so okay. Oh, so anyway, so now the next one, okay, I'm only like phase one. Okay, now phase one, okay. So in this phase, Japanese view of America began to become really decidedly mixed, not just adoration, but it's a much more, and here's the big thing. In 1889, the Meiji emperor promulgated Meiji Constitution of 1889. And the Meiji Constitution established the emperor and not the people as the source of power and sovereignty. And that's directly opposing the U.S. concept of popular sovereignty, right? So emperor was the sovereign, ultimate sovereign. This 1889 document created a very weak legislature, far from the America's model of Article I institution, the powerful Congress. And then this was a really highly influenced by Western constitutional thoughts, but it was very borrowed from Prussia. It was designed to create a Prussian-style centralized monarchy. And so that's what this constitution did. And what the American constitution did not have any influence on this document at all. And what does that mean? That means that Japan made a very conscious choice how to really sort of develop and build out a nation, new constitutional monarchy, but not constitutional democracy. And Japan, at this point, 1899, did not aspire to American-style constitutional democracy just yet. So now, so then 20th century, we are going to 20th century. Okay, Japanese views of America became decidedly more mixed in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. Why? One reason was Japan was becoming an imperial power in its own right. And that means that they are going head to head, butting head against American imperial presence in the Far East, particularly in a place like the Philippines. So that kind of geopolitical new reality was one reason why Japanese don't think kindly of America that more. But also the second reason was that Japanese migration to the United States began. After the Chinese exclusion law in 1882, they began to import Japanese labor to substitute for ban the Chinese labor. Corporate capital always finds a way to find a cheap labor. So this is so that's why there was a very anti-Japanese, anti-labor agitation on the West Coast in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. And in California, even in 1913, there's such a law as California land law, which means it banned Japanese land ownership in California. And almost all of them are farmers. So you know what that does, right? Anyway, so this is over the issue of geopolitics and migration, that the relationship was going really kind of dicey. But on the other side, Japanese became so fascinated with American popular culture, mass consumption, that kind of thing. And the new dimension of America that created attraction, American popular culture, Hollywood movies, jazz began to enter Japan's middle-class urban cultures and consumer culture, like fashion, lifestyles, and food. People began to eat food, bread and butter, coffee, and ice cream. And they all came from the West Coast, the US West Coast. And another interesting thing is this campaign. So this doll is called blue-eye dolls, or also called American friendship dolls. So you may know that in 1924, the American government legislated the Johnson-Reed Act of Congress, that's immigration, anti-immigration law, the National Origin Act, and under that immigration law, agents could no longer come into the United States, and that really, really enraged the Japanese because they thought of themselves as the rising new empire. But anyway, so in order to really sort of assuage that sense, then this guy on the left, he was a former minister. Who had lived in Japan, launched this campaign that American church and girls will send the dolls to Japan. And the total of 12,000 dolls was sent to Japan in 1927. And it was an object of envy. But the thing is that it was this blue-eyed blonde. And then there's this sort of, perception was created that the real American was blue-eyed and blonde. And even while the Asians are being excluded, the Japanese themselves were buying into that kind of racial concept as well, which was very interesting. And that kind of sort of indoctrination was done not so intentionally, but through the doll, consumer items as well. And this guy is something really interesting. So, sorry. This guy is, he's called, what did I do? What happened? Sorry, did I do something? Sorry. Oh yeah, sorry. That was me, mea culpa, sorry. I must just, So this guy was actually, also he was the vagabond in Japan. He was kicked out of a Japanese school and dropped out of Japanese college. So where do you go? You go to America, right? So, and he ended up going to Oberlin College. And he did not finish it either, but then he wanted to stay. But in order to really earn money to support, finance his schooling, he did various odd jobs, like washing dishes, and then working as a bouncers at the speakeasies, and circus boys, and all kinds of the menial jobs, the kind of stuff that immigrants would do. And he just wandered through America. And in 1824, he had enough money, so he thought, maybe I'll just go to Japan for a while and come back. And what happened? 1824, Johnson-Reed Act. So he could not really come back anymore. So he had to stay in Japan. But he became a novelist, and he popularized a serial novel series to talk about his experience as a laborer in the United States in the roaring 20s. And that became really part of the national consciousness of the Japanese. And this one is, oh my God, sorry, I'm not good. Well, so this most famous one is the serialized novel of his vagabond life called American Jap. Horrible. And this other one was called Homeless in Texas. Whatever. And he talks about how that cowboy is not really a really glamorous things, and all they do is just carry horse manure and stuff. And so sorry. So this is so with this kind of novels and stuff, then America's popular culture was really spread across Japan as well. And some of the things he said was very interesting. He said in his novels, he talked about what it was like for immigrants' labor to live in the United States. And also he talked about how immigrant labor was exploited in the United States. And it was not just the Japanese, but Chinese too. And also at the intellectual level, there was in Japan, at least, there was this talk of a black Japanese racial solidarity, and then we're going to just go fight against this white supremacy kind of thing. That was an intellectual discourse. And what he said, this novel, is that's a lie. There's no Japanese-black solidarity because we compete for the same jobs, and we hate each other. And this is the kind of things that he really transmitted to the Japanese through his popular novels. Okay, so Jay, I have to go, right? So okay, World War II happened. Okay, sorry, my things were coming down. So I have to go quickly. Okay, World War II happened. Right? It did happen, and it was a really brutal war. No matter how you cut it, you slice it, it was a brutal, both ends. Pearl Harbor, starting at the Pearl Harbor and ending in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was a brutal war. But actually, surrender ceremony is very interesting. Okay, Japan's surrender to the United States on board of this U.S. ship. What was it? Missouri. Why do you think that was chosen? To homage to President Truman, right? Yeah, so Missouri. And in this surrender ceremony, Perry's flag, the flag that he was flying in the on the black ship, was displayed. Oh, no, sorry, I'm so horrible about this. Okay, this is it was a basic, yeah, this was, and then this was falling apart, so they could not really fly, so they have to mount it on the wall. But that was a symbolic gesture, like, well, you have to surrender, like the way you surrender to the Perry. So the Japanese loss in World War II basically ushered in Japan's second opening, and various reforms were instituted at the behest of U.S. occupation. And some of the most meaningful reforms, like universal suffrage, was introduced during the U.S. occupation period. Land reform was done during freedom of speech came to be guaranteed. Labor organizing was allowed, and education reforms were done. And this is really kind of ironic. Healthcare was instituted in Japan. A lot of the New Dealers who really couldn't really do anything and they were in the occupation forces, and they lived out their dream. And so there was some other indigenous movement that also joined forces with that too. But universal healthcare was made in Japan during the occupation period, and so when the Japanese now hear that the Americans don't have health care, they get confused. What do you mean? Like, you gave it to us? So it's possible. When there's a will, there's a way, obviously. But, okay, most important is, okay, sorry, this post-war constitution, 1947 American post-war constitution that went into effect in 1947. And this was heavily influenced by the U.S. Constitution. It adopts several key American legal principles, particularly regarding civil liberties and government structures. And key elements taken from the U.S. Constitution very consciously and American legal thought include fundamental human rights. The post-war Constitution includes a Bill of Rights, and also that mirrors many of the rights in the U.S. Bill of Rights, and such as free speech and freedom of assembly. And also into this Constitution, this term, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the Japanese translation thereof was written into Article 13 of the Japanese post-war Constitution, this phrase from the U.S. Constitution. And also the separation of powers was also included in this Constitution. The notion of judicial review was also part of this institution. So Supreme Court was created. And also, this is most important, popular sovereignty. The document shifted the basis of government power and sovereignty from the emperor to the people. And clearly that was adopting the U.S. we the people model. And that was the post-war Constitution. And another thing that's so interesting is that Article 14 and 24 of U.S. Post-war Constitution, no, this one, okay, Constitution actually includes equal rights, gender equal rights. I mean, in the United States, it took so long to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, but it's 1947, it was already there. And the reason why it was there is that this one 22-year-old woman, American, in occupation forces, the other boys thought that gender equality, that kind of thing, was not important enough. So they gave the task to her, and then she was the only one assigned to this job, and she wrote this gender equality rights. And nobody really cared enough about to take it out of the draft. So it stuck. So in 1947, the Constitution, like United States Equal Rights Amendment, still not really, but it was already there. But I mean, even though that was there, it doesn't really mean you have to really, law can only do much, and then it has to be really enforced, and then also so people has to make it a real reality. So, I mean, even now, Japan, in terms of the gender gap report, Japan ranks the lowest in the G7 countries, and Japan ranks 118th of a total of 148. So obviously, this gender equality right did not really do much, but to me, it's really interesting that the post-war constitution that was consciously taken from the United States Constitution even included the gender equality clause as well, thanks to this 22-year-old woman. Anyway, I have 2 more pages, but I know he's going to kill me, so I'm going to stop now. But now that at least I can talk about the post-war constitution, so maybe some of the stuff I did not get to cover, maybe I can cover in the Q&A. So thank you. Sorry.
No. So while we're getting her settled, I do want to remind you all, we have a QR code on the pamphlets. We're populating questions live on my iPad, so if you have something you want to hear about, we have a lot of questions, so I might combine them into something thematically, but I promise we'll try and get to as many questions as possible.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, are you ready to begin?
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
ready.
awesome.
I'm pumped up.
Excellent.
As you can tell.
Yeah.
And I'm ready for wine too. So.
Yeah.
It's called the pursuit of happiness, right?
Yes. Well, we have a lot of questions, and we have a few centered around baseball.
Okay, right.
And so I want to start there, and then we're going to go to more contemporary politics and history as well. So in particular, we had some questions about the 1934 tour of Babe Ruth, and thinking about the limits of soft power, right?
Yes.
It's a successful mission, but diplomatic relations continue to go south. So what does that tell us about how effective soft power can be? Are there limits to it, and how can we successfely use it to bridge ties?
Well, that's a great, wonderful question. And what I always say is that the soft power and hard power is not two separate entities. And to a large extent, soft power does rely on hard power. And there's only so much soft power can do, really. And when the hard power starts to really cranking, and then sometimes it just doesn't really do much. So the baseball tour in 1934, it was, as I said, the diplomatic relations was going downhill, but they were still able to sort of create this facade of friendship. And it was a soft power, but it was even used by the Japanese government and to a little extent by the American government to create this sort of false facade that everything is okay, we are not fighting, we're not going to go to war. And so the soft power is a really double-edged sword, I would say. It creates all this sense of admiration on the receptor, but then you can also be a tool of manipulation. And I think 1934 Ruth tour was a really good example of that kind of soft power being used as a tool of manipulation and image management.
Yeah, and kind of building off of that, baseball has really become an international phenomenon both in Japan and elsewhere. And so how do you view the globalization of baseball now? Is it still a soft power export of the United States, or is it viewed as more of an international kind of ownership of the sport now?
It's a very interesting, there's an interesting sort of a turf battle going on between the Major League Baseball and the Japanese version of a national professional NPB. And they all said that the baseball is a transnational global game, but they also have to claim the ownership of it now too. And then there's a lot of Japanese former NPB players going to the MLB, and then how do you deal with a contractual business. I mean, it's a very global sport and global business. And it has really become their sort of, I don't know, commercial companies, the baseball, interest in baseball and the business of baseball became globalized. But then in a strange way, it's still nationally segmented in a way. So I don't know if I answered that question, but it's a global sport and it's a global business of sports as well. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. So kind of picking up right where you left off at your presentation, we had a few questions about how the aftermath and World War II factor into Japan's conceptualization of the United States. So more specifically, the atomic bombs being dropped, as well as the internment camps for Japanese Americans. How does that factor into the Japanese imagination?
It's really interesting. So the post-war period, during the occupation period, which lasted from 45 to 52, the media was censored. There's a strong censorship in the occupation. American authorities basically restricted information dissemination. So the atomic bomb was really, the information on that bombing was not really readily available, not widely available. Everybody knew this happened, but the extent of that damage and destruction, a lot of people was not really privy to. And it's a really thing, it's a weird thing, the news cycle, there wasn't a news cycle back then, but then after lapse of certain times and people start to forget it. Yeah. And then by 1952, the Japanese was so happy about becoming independent. And then also, this is one of the things that I did not get to do, but Japan really benefited from the post-war international order that the United States created, the rule-based international order. And most of the Japanese post-war prosperity that became possible in the late 1950s, going to 60s, 70s, that became possible because the exports to the relatively open market called the United States market. And so that kind of economic interdependence, and the Japanese knew it, and America was a very, very important market. And people, yeah, at least reasonably thoughtful people knew that the United States open market was really the key to the post-war Japanese economic miracle. So once you start living well, right, and then you have food on the table and the clothes in the back, and living in the bombed out house anymore, then it's really hard to really keep that kind of bitter memory alive, especially for a younger generation, because Japanese public schools did not do a very good job of history. They did not really talk about, until recently, Japanese schools in the history class did not talk about Japanese invasion of China or the colonization of Taiwan and or the Korea too. So some younger people, maybe in my generation, people who went to school in the 60s and 70s, maybe even 80s too, that really did not know that Japan was once an imperial power and colonized Asia. And they so when they go and then face the hostility of Koreans, they were like, where is this coming from? Like, hello. So this kind of, so the media was a very kind of, the information universe was very kind of strangely shaped in the post-war Japan by the Japanese government and the American government as well. And about the internment of Japanese citizens during World War II, it was surprisingly, a lot of people didn't even know about it. It was not told. And so, because it was post-war, I mean, if the information would come out in the post-war, and for 7 years, that was information was controlled by the United States. And this is another interesting class aspect of it. In the Japanese society, at least in this early 20th century migration, the people who migrate to the United States are considered to be rural, lower class people. I mean, they could not really, so they have to go someplace else to work. So there's some kind of, the Japanese elite and urban middle class, they have this sort of class-based snobbery about them. And what they went through was not really considered worth really narrating about, and then, and then also getting upset about. And they really thought of them as some really poor rural folks. And I think that kind of class aspect of the Japanese post-war society really had a lot to do with the fact that they did not really take issue with the internment of Japanese Americans.
That's very interesting, thank you. So when we're thinking about, you mentioned the kind of opening up to international markets, Japan is also selling itself in its own image and has cultural effects on the United States. So I wonder if you can tell the audience a little bit about how Japanese cultural soft power influence on the United States has played out over the last 8 years.
Well, I mean, a lot of the students, college students who want to take Japanese history class or Japanese language, whereas because they became familiar with the Japanese, with the anime and manga and that sort of thing. So that was like a reverse flow of Japanese cultural influence too, Pikachu and stuff, right? So to that extent, it's really, I see the actual result of that kind of backflow of Japanese soft power. But then, and also, when I started living in the United States in the late 1980s, Americans still did not eat like sushi. Did you notice? Like, it was sort of like something like, kind of thing, right? But now, like, sushi is like, even supermarkets sell sushi, right? And then also ramen, right? Ramen, everybody loves ramen. It's pretty expensive here, right? I mean, $20 a bowl. It's a cheap student food over there, like $4. So anyway, but the foodways, the Japanese food is much more like accepted. So it's a part of the soft power too. And I really do feel that Japanese anime and manga really shaped the perception of what the Japanese were in certain generation, younger generation of Americans. I have a very interesting, maybe I should not, but episode to share. So when I was at Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. many years ago, then I lived in Washington, D.C. For a year. And there was a post office in my neighborhood. For some reason, the lady at that counter did not like me, always like yelling at me, and I did not hand her money the right way, and it made me redo it and that sort of thing. And one time, she started yelling at me. I was not really like standing in line in the right place or something. So she started yelling at me, but I wasn't sure that she was yelling at me or someone else. So I was like this, is that me? And you know what she said? Yes, yo, Hello Kitty. I'm a Hello Kitty. It's so bad, but you have to laugh. It's pretty good, right? That's my cocktail party. Yeah, so the Japanese soft power,
Great. So we have a few questions about the state of relations today between the two countries.
Yes.
And first, I want to start us off with what is the perception of the influence of the United States today? Is there pushback from people saying we're too influential in Japanese politics? Are there pushes to bring us closer together, to take us further apart?
I think the perception is that, I think very similar to what Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, said, that for the most part, for the 45 until even, there were times that the U.S.-Japanese relations were really rocky, especially in the 1980s, that when the Japanese exports were flooding the American markets and stuff. But then, I think most of the Japanese had this perception that they could rely on the United States. And the United States would maintain that rule-based international order. Rule of law meant something. And I think Japanese begin to feel that that's no longer given. If America is going to be really the protector of the rule-based international rule. So, and it cannot really depend on the United States. So Japan should really start cultivating relations with the other powers as well. Because in the post-war period, the United States alliance with the United States was the alliance. And now they're talking about maybe we should be, like even China, right? Or we should reach out to the European Union, that sort of thing. So really, to me, is very sad that how that the Japanese estimation of the United States as the guardian of the rule of law is now being eroded. And I find it very, very sad. So,
Yeah, so I wonder in response to that, what are the discussions in Japan about rearmament and its role as military after 80 years of the U.S. kind of providing security guarantees?
Yep. So this is what the right wing, I shouldn't say right wing, but the people like on the right, they use it as what the U.S. can no longer be relied upon, so we have to rearm and do this and that, and then obviously that there's a pushback too. And the Japanese rearming, I mean, Japan in the post-war, I forgot to talk about it, in the post-war constitution, there was a very big difference between the Japanese Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, which is Article 9. The Japanese banned from maintaining the military. So Japan is not allowed to have the military, but Korean War happened, and the United States actually started thinking differently about Japanese armament, and they wanted the Japanese to rearm, but there's a constitution, so the Japanese actually could not have a military. So what do? You call it the self-defense forces. Yeah. So, but then self-defense forces is basically, practically an army. It's just the name is self-defense forces, the army. But then, building up the Japanese army, regionally, is going to have a very, very difficult, destabilizing ramification as well. I mean, not just that China would not really think kindly to that, but also the countries like Taiwan or Korea or Indonesia, those countries that have the experience of being invaded by the Japanese, militarily controlled by the Japanese, they really don't want the Japanese to rearm and build up their arms. And they wanted the United States to be in Asia Pacific on behalf of Japanese rearming. But then now the Americans don't know, they might just pull out and then they cannot be counted on. Then when Japanese rearmament comes in. And a lot of Asian people are very, very nervous about it. So the Americas not really being relied upon has all these kind of cascading events regionally as well. And then, yeah, so I think we Americans should be really aware of that. It's not just America. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So switching gears just a little bit here, you spoke a little bit on gender equality and values around gender, and Japan has its first female prime minister.
Oh, don't get me started on that prime minister. No, yeah, we're going into dangerous territory if I start talking about her. So, did you see that picture of her like almost clinging on to Trump and like giggly, and then that was so embarrassing. And I think Trump liked it. Sorry.
Well, I wonder even if we just abstract it a little bit then, which is fine. What does that tell us about evolving gender norms in Japan? Are you seeing this as a sign of progress, or how should we be interpreting this from kind of a cultural lens?
Oh, so the fact that we now have the Japanese, first female Japanese prime minister, well, she was basically became the prime minister because she was the golden girl of those old boys. She just basically rose through the party ranks and the Japanese political system by doing the boys' bidding. And whenever there's a need for some, like a token girl and a woman, and she was it, and she played the part perfectly. I'm sorry, I'm bad-mouthing prime minister, but yeah. So in that sense, the fact that a lot of Japanese feminists and women are so sad that. Well, it's great that Japan has the first prime minister, but why it have to be that woman? Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll switch gears then. We'll go to some safer territory.
I'm getting the jittery. Somebody has to restrain me.
So the audience is clearly really interested in this idea of sports and soft power.
Yep.
Japan recently hosted an Olympics. How do you view that as part of this projection of soft power, and how should we be viewing Japan's
Well,
role?
that was a total loser operation, the Tokyo Olympics, right? Because, I mean, they really wanted to put so much money into it, and the COVID hit, so it has to be postponed 1 year. And the whole rationale was, okay, that we were putting all this money into it, but we get all this recognition, and then also there will be a business effects of it, economic effects of it. But then it was delayed, and they were not allowed to have any like spectators. So no, like a business side of it was totally meaningless. And in terms of recognition, it's different, right? I mean, if you only don't have any audience, right, or the spectators. So I think it was it's bombed, really. Yeah. So, but then Japan is trying to, do a culture exercise soft power from sports too. So sponsoring a lot of international competitions, and then also sponsoring some so-called amateur Olympic level athletes, and then also they are really pushing baseball too as well, because now they know that the baseball is something that Japan can, I mean, legitimately argue that they are good at, right? So the Ohtani, like Shohei Ohtani is like really the king of soft power, right? And then if you go to Japan, you will see Shohei Ohtani all over the place. You cannot even ride a subway without seeing all the Shohei Ohtani. So that he's really being used as a weapon of soft power as well. I still wanted my daughter to marry him.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue to our final question. So maybe we can find a future son-in-law for you from an MLB player, right?
Yeah.
And so how do these players present Japan to American audiences? There's a lot of different Major League Baseball stars.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know what that, but what to me is very interesting is that when the first Japanese baseball players played in Major League in the 1960s, the Americans' fan response was not very favorable. The Japanese cannot play baseball, but then Ichiro and Matsui and Nomo and all these people coming and really making their own in the Major League Baseball, and even Shohei Ohtani, I mean, he's the MVP and doing all kinds of records, and I don't even sense any resentment on the part of American baseball fans. I think, I don't know, I may be biased, but even Ichiro too, and Matsui too, the Americans don't seem to really get upset that the leading hitter was a Japanese and stuff. They look at Japanese, those players as baseball players. And I really do think, genuinely, it sounds a little corny, but somebody like adopted American, that I think it's really a reflection of how more open the American became in terms of racial and ethnic kind of dimension of it. And then they learn to see somebody as baseball player as opposed to Japanese baseball players. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but yeah.
All right, well, wonderful. Well, before we give a final round of applause, I just want to remind everybody we will have drinks in the back as well as some light bites on the mezzanine and another bar over there. I also want to highlight for you, we have multiple events, but the next two for other perspectives is on April 10th, right here, same time, same place. We'll be getting the view from Korea. And then a week after that, April 17th, we'll be getting the view from home, right here at 5 p.m. at the Tiger Hotel. So thank you for a really wonderful presentation.